welcome back to the Constitutionals Podcast, episode 183 point. Let me choose a number. 4. Nope, I think I used 4 last time. 183.7 was the original one I was going to go with. I don't know why I didn't do that. Here we are, another interview. I know the last episode we just put out, officially episode 183, which is supposed to be last week's episode. But now we have a special bonus episode, 183.7. Here I have an interview with the one, the only Jerky Boys. Jerky Boys are 80s and 90s, mostly, because they started out in the 80s and 90s. 80s, excuse me. And mostly it's prank phone calls, but characters. And there's a very funny thing. It's truly a basically one of the mainstays of comedy. I would say. I wouldn't guess. I would say there's things in comedy where you can go, okay, Carson did this for late night television. He started this for late night television. He did this. He helped solidify this. Jerky Boys were essentially that for phones, for prank calls. It's a very, very funny medium that maybe we take for granted. Maybe that's neat. That's a way of saying it. Maybe it's the way we do it. We take it for granted. So I spoke to Johnny Brennan, very funny guy. You may know him as Morton Goldman from Family Guy. It feels like I said very funny guy, and then in my head I was like, did I say Family Guy? He's a very Family Guy. He's on Morton Goldman from Family Guy. So imagine, but also he's this very tough sounding New Yorker guy. He's got this cool accent. Anyway, you'll hear it. But this new album is called The Jerky Boys, self-titled, and he's back doing same characters, mostly new characters, and he just really brings back this air of. I think this is the first album in 20 years, but I think this is album number 4 officially. They've done there's multiple albums that exist, but I think this is it's the first one since 1999. The first official one since 1999 that can actually be called a sequel. Because you know how some things are done and there's sequels and there's not sequels and there's spinoffs and all that stuff like that. Consider everything between 99 and now from the Jerky Boys a spinoff. And while they're good in their own merit, this is the thing that's going to bring in the real fans and the new fans. Certainly, I listened to it and it brought in me. That could be the name of my comedy tape. So, Johnny Brennan and when he spoke, and I remember this. I'm just now remembering this. So this is a fresh off the dome story. When he called me and there were. I guess there was like a storm that knocked out the power in his house, and I think the Verizon people or the power people had to come over, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, well, can I call you back in like 10, 15 minutes?" I'm like, yeah, sure. He called me back in 10, 15 minutes, and we were speaking, and he's just so efficient and smart, and he has an answer for everything, and not in a way that that you would go, oh, okay, you're leading me on. No, this guy's got a story for everything. He's got, he's funny. He's very off the cuff. And it's interesting to see how his mind works. When you talk to somebody, you want to understand and get to know them, especially in these types of interviews. And so, what I like to, you can probably hear Michael Scott screaming in the background because The Office is on. And I must need on. But I spoke to him for about 20 some odd minutes. 29. I'm looking at the properties of the file. It says 29 minutes. I wonder how much of that is me going, "Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you for talking to me. I so much appreciate it." You gotta be able to make fun of yourself. You gotta be able to make fun of yourself. But this was a treat because my entire, I guess. I wouldn't say my entire life, but my entire comedy life, my entire comedy career life, I have heard tale of the Jerky Boys. I've heard references, I've heard comedians talk about them. And I mean, if you were any type of into comedy, then you will definitely know who the Jerky Boys are. And if not, I mean, still give the interview a listen. He's a very funny guy. This Johnny Brennan. This Johnny B. He's got a great voice too. Real cool voice. So yes. So the album came out on Black Friday. The embargo did lift on that, but I decided to hold off until today for obvious reasons that I didn't want to do anything on Black Friday except spend money. But this is great. I am glad to have spoken to Johnny Brennan. He's a great guy, and I'm glad he actually, gave me a lot of time. So if you are a fan of comedy, please listen to this. And if you're not a fan of comedy, why are you listening to this niche comedy podcast from me? I really like this chat guy. Not a fan of the medium. I'm not a fan of the median either. I like the mode. That's a joke for people who remember their math from high school geometry, I guess. Mean, median, and mode. Is that geometry or is that just algebra? I was horrible at math in high school. I had to go to a place called Mathnasium to do my math, to get help with. They were like math tutors, very expensive math tutors. A place where you can go, and not even tutoring. They help you. And it was crazy because a lot of people I went to high school with actually worked there. So... and a lot of them were my friends. It just felt so stupid sometimes. Yeah, I'd just leave football practice and then go there. Hey, can you help me with my homework, please? I'm not too good at this whole math thing. Hey, look at me. I'm a Jerky Boy now. He, she, me, we, Jerky Boys. I'm just trying to fill out time. I want to do 10 minutes because I saw I was at 6 minutes. Now I got another 3 minutes to fill. There was also a Jerky Boys movie. I did not watch it. I saw the trailer for it, and I saw it. There's clips of it online, obviously, because the movie is old. That's at a time that I guess the Jerky Boys movie came at a time where anybody could have a movie. There's like a span of time from like the 70s until the early 2000s where any and everybody, you had a decent property, you could get a movie. And then there's like maybe 15 years where that didn't happen. And now we're back to anybody can have a movie. Steven Universe, Adventure Time. Any one of these things. I'm going to name something that's not a cartoon. I could see, maybe, I was going to say Schitt's Creek, but that wouldn't make sense because that's all wrapped up. But HBO, Deadwood had a movie. Anything could have a movie now. I miss those times where anything could have a movie in the late 90s, in the 80s. Was there? My cat just sneezed. There was a Smurfs movie recently, within the past 2 decades. But would you want to see a Snorks movie? Okay, let me just end this here. All right, Johnny Brennan, great guy. This is the interview I did with him. Please listen to it, share it with your friends, and because I'm not going to wrap up this episode at the end of the interview, if you like this thing here, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at C+Comedy. Oh God, I did it the wrong way. Head to the website cpluscomedy.com where there are so many other interviews with your favorite comedians that you'll go, oh my gosh, there are so many interviews here. How does Chad do it? How does one man do it? And I go, thank you. Because I'm working on accepting compliments. Twitter, Instagram at C+Comedy. Me on Twitter, Instagram at Chad Blackwhite. Like us on Facebook. Go to youtube.com/C+Comedy to see videos, a video version of the podcast. Not this episode, though. And see News Time, which is our premiere show, which is like the Daily Show, except way less funny, where I sit down and I dissect a story one by one, and inch by inch, and detail by detail. Detail by detail. That could also be the name of my comedy album. Definitely check it out. What else is going on, Chad? That's it, guys. Who knows? Who cares? We're all living. We're all doing this. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Here you go. Coming up next, Johnny Brennan. Enjoy.
All my shit got ripped out the other day when the tree fell.
Oh, jeez. Well, so what is that? How long is that going to take for them to do that?
I don't have to be bothered with them. I showed them where everything is, so they're going to fix that now. So me and you can just do whatever we got to do.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I just didn't want you to be rushed or anything.
No, I'm good now, man.
Well, good. I'm glad to finally sit down with you because I've heard of the Jerky Boys for as long as they've been like the troupe has been around, because I knew about the tapes being passed around in the 90s when in the early 2000s when I was getting into comedy. So this is a kind of a dream to see come true.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The Jerky Boys it's a pretty fascinating story. And actually, a lot of my stuff was done in the 70s, and it took the 80s to cook. It started really cooking in the 80s, and by the mid 80s, like 84, 85, is when Howard Stern got a hold of it, and he was playing it on the radio, and he started saying, "Man, if anybody knows this Frank Rizzo guy, please call into the station. I got to find out who this is." He said, "It's the funniest thing I ever heard in my life." And that's when it started to really catch legs. And then, by the late 80s, the New York Times said it was the largest bootleg ever. And then in the early, like 91 and stuff, that's when it started to, get official, where Atlantic Records signed me, and it started to become a major, major deal. And it wasn't long after that Walt Disney Pictures wanted, a feature film.
It's an interesting start, because I didn't know it started with the Stern blow up. Because when I think of prank calls, I think of only two names, Jerky Boys and Stern, and I think that's really good company, because I think there's a right way to do them and a wrong way to do them, and it's a lot of people do them wrong, but you guys do them right, without hurting anybody.
Right. Well, see, that's kind of the gift of the Jerky Boys. Howard said years ago. See, the funny thing is about Stern already had massive fame. So he was already famous for being a radio disc jockey. So Howard had massive fame, and he was handed this bootleg, the Jerky Boys bootleg, and Howard was able to take his fame and get behind it and say that this Jerky Boy stuff is the funniest thing I ever heard in my life. And Spin Magazine took advantage of that when I finally hit the scene and took out a full-page ad of Howard Stern's quotes, actually. He a couple of quotes. And, and the rest is history. It's just an amazing, it's an amazing trip. It's an amazing, absolutely.
Do you ever, whenever you do the calls, or when you were doing them back in a couple years ago too, did you ever plan these out, or was everything off the top, or was it just based on the character?
Well, that's the thing. It was based on the character, and there was never anything planned. I always loved spontaneity and to just let things unfold and then kind of go down that road as it was unraveling. I found that is the best way that I work. And I'm sure you even on the new record, when I went to do this new record, I wanted to do the same thing. I didn't want to feel like when I made Jerky Boys 1, it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. People fucking fell in love with it. So now can you imagine, now I have to make Jerky Boys 2 and Jerky Boys 3 and 4 and so on. So there was always, me trying to one up, enough years have gone by, and I said to myself, why don't I approach this the same way I did many decades ago when I just did it for me and my brothers. I wasn't doing it for any other reason. Whatever character seemed to come out of my mouth, I just went with. I didn't try to, and that's what I did with this particular record. I just did it basically for me and what I felt at the moment and what character, how it felt. And it felt really kind of good to do that. It was almost, it was almost like refreshing to go in, in the mind and let your mind just kind of just relax and just go with it.
Yeah, during an interview, I think you did last year, you said you called Jerky Boys improvisational theater of the mind, and that's how you use it as a way not to laugh during the calls, because you were the characters and you thought that those characters thought it was real, and that's a great way for a comedian to tackle their version of comedy, because if you think it's real, then you're going to sell it. And, that's why Bill Burr works, because he's so angry. And that same thing for Lewis Black and every other comedian out there.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. A lot of these top comedians for many, many decades, Eddie Murphy, Bill Burr, all these guys, they're huge Jerky Boys fans. Bill Burr said if he ever had to be stuck on an island somewhere, he'd have to have his Frank Rizzo records, his Jerky Boys records. So, it's great that a lot of these comedians over the years have been, and what's funny is my manager is actually Chris Mazzilli, who he owns Gotham Comedy Club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the biggest names in comedy have come through his doors. Jerry Seinfeld, Bill Burr, all these guys, he knows them all. And they all pretty much tell Chris the same thing. They're like, oh my God, just such huge fans of Johnny's work. And it makes me very appreciative. I love that, because you're right. When I do the characters, it's for real. It's not like, Seth MacFarlane asked me one time, he goes, Johnny, one of the most freaking funniest things that you do, he goes, when Saul Rosenberg fell down that time in the apartment and he broke his leg when he was going to look for the chainsaw, he fell, and he says, and you just laid there and you just keep going, and you just keep going over and over and over. And Seth said, and if you notice, Seth loved that so much, he uses it in Family Guy. Whenever Peter falls,
yeah,
Peter lays there for a half an hour just going, and that's like a lot of the anecdotes that you see in Family Guy are actually from Jerky Boys. And it's just amazing. Seth MacFarlane's another one, very talented, and he grew up listening. He grew up. That's why, I'm on Family Guy now, 19 seasons.
Yeah. And that's and that character, Mort, Mort's based off of the one you do from your mother, right? The, what is that character's name?
Saul Rosenberg.
Yeah, Saul Rosenberg. Yeah. Because I think you said that one's based off of your mother, correct?
Yeah, Saul Rosenberg. Whenever I do Saul or Mort Goldman, the personality is my mom, and the voice is my mom. And I had one. It's funny. I had one story. What do you call writer? A writer was at my house from Maxim magazine,
mm-hmm.
and he said, I'd love to speak to your mom. So I brought him up for the second meeting, and he got to meet my mom. And as soon as my mom started to speak to him, he put his hands over his mouth, and he was laughing in my mom's face. and he's like, I'm so sorry. I don't mean. She goes, oh, I get it all the time. And because she, he could hear instantly. He could hear Saul Rosenberg.
That's so funny. So
he was laughing.
You mentioned that since your manager is the person who owns Gotham, and all these other comedians have looked up to the Jerky Boys for so long, do you ever think about doing an album? It doesn't have to be Jerky Boys 4, but an album that is features the voices of these people joining in on the calls, and it kind of taking it back to the original conceit of Jerky Boys, where it's just two people, clowning around on the phone with one person who's unsuspected of it?
It's funny that has come up before, and even for cartoons or TV shows. But the funny thing is, you'd be surprised. Just because somebody's a comedian, or they're a good comedian or a funny comedian, they also understand that what I do is completely different from stand-up comedy. You're actually it's actually you're on the fly, and everything's got to be done on the fly. There's nothing written, there's nothing scripted, there's nothing that you study. You just have to be able to react and be in this world. And a lot of comedians that I know that have actually tried it, they say, Johnny, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. They're like, I didn't realize how hard that shit is. And I say, well, it is hard, but you I don't know. I don't even know. I can't just say to somebody, oh, you could do it. And but it's very difficult if you try it.
Yeah, it is because, sometimes you'll get a telemarketer and then I'll just start, messing with them as long as I possibly can. But I don't think any of it's funny. I just think that I'm doing it and trying to be funny.
Right. That's the difference. And that's what Howard Stern said. Howard Stern said it years ago. He goes, there will never be another Jerky Boys. He says it won't happen. He goes, because Johnny has taken characters that he's grown up with his whole life. His mom, his dad, his Uncle Vinny, that's Kissel. And all of my characters come from family members or friends that I've known or grown up with since the 1960s. So that's why Howard Stern said it will never be repeated. And that's why the people beloved, these characters are so beloved. People, like if you listen to Frank Rizzo, it's the funniest thing you hear over the years. People say, man, Frank Rizzo, he scares the shit out of you. But you know what? There's something I really love about Frank. And there's something lovable about that guy. And that's what's been doing it all these years. People actually love the characters.
Since there was already a movie that was made, are there any other mediums that you would want to branch the Jerky Boys into?
Absolutely. Like I said, I'm working right now with on a cartoon. So that would be fantastic. Jerky Boys cartoon, that would be just right up the alley for these guys, these characters. And they're perfect for it. You see my characters on Family Guy. My characters are Mort Goldman is one of the favorite characters of all time on that show. And Seth told me himself, he said, Johnny, he said, when we made up the dolls, they made a Mort Goldman doll. He says, we couldn't keep the Mort Goldman dolls. They were gone. People, that's all they wanted was the Mort Goldman doll. So Mort Goldman is a very loved character. As a matter of fact, a lot of people say two of their favorite Family Guy episodes are Family Gay, where I play my gay character in Family Gay, and the other one is Road to Germany, where my character Mort Goldman goes back to Nazi Germany.
I remember both of those episodes. They're very funny from what I can recall. But then you lost Muriel. You lost the wife.
Yes.
Yes. I think Jerky Boys makes room for you to try, different things. But do you think it's applicable to different styles of comedy? Like, do you think Jerky Boys would translate outside of the phone world? Like, even if you're building this cartoon show, could it translate to other stuff just as easily?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Jerky Boys could translate, pretty much any application you can think of. I mean, I've done, Jesus, what do you call those things? It came out on the iPhones. What do you call it? Like games and stuff. I've done little games and pinball machines and the Jerky Boys. Pretty much. I went into the commercial world. I done commercials for Anheuser-Busch, Subway sandwiches, Lee Jeans Company, and I won the Mercury Award more than once for best commercials of the year. So the Jerky Boys, pretty much wherever they go, they're very successful. And again, you know why, Chad? Again, because people really love the characters. They've loved them. You're talking 5 decades now.
Right.
You're talking many, many moons.
Yeah, it's I've never heard a comedian say anything negative in terms of the Jerky Boys. It's always been a very reverential thing, and I think that's one of the few parts of comedy that has helped out really in the long run.
Well, you look at some of the giants that are out there now. Amy Schumer. Amy Schumer said that I was the reason she got into comedy, and she's like one of my biggest fans. And not Lisa Lampanelli, any of these major comics. It's pretty amazing. And then you look at like anywhere you take anything you want. Take the basketball, NBA. You take Major League Baseball, you take football, you take hockey, even the World Wrestling Federation. You know, wherever you go, my fan base is tremendous. NASCAR, you take NASCAR. You know, some of the biggest NASCAR shops are the biggest fans of mine, and the Jerky Boys. So it pretty much transcends everything because I think it just makes people feel good, you know?
Yeah. Now, did the tapes being passed around, did that ever affect you in a way that, like, you know, the bootlegs where you weren't getting paid, did that ever, you think that helped you out in the long run, or did it affect you adversely?
No, I would have to say that it definitely helped out in the long run because it was such an explosive new form of comedy. So, and if you really think, and you go back in time, before the Jerky Boys hit the scene with my characters, before that, there was nothing reality-wise. There was nothing where you could say, this is the only thing that was before that where you could say, oh my God, you got to see this, it's real, was Alan Funt and Candid Camera. Do you remember that?
I do, yes.
Right, and Alan Funt was a genius. And if you watch any of Alan Funt's stuff, people could say, "Oh my God, you got to see this. He practical jokes these people, and it's real." And that's what happened when the Jerky Boys came along. You know, in the '70s, you know, people would say, "Oh my God, you got to hear this. It's fucking real. You got to listen to this." And they would make tapes, and they would make tapes, and they would make 10 tapes, and they would give them out to friends and family. So don't forget, there was no internet when I hit the scene. You know, all we had then was cassette tapes, and people would make cassettes and hand them out, and I think that helped. Like I said, the New York Times said it was the largest bootleg ever, and I think that was a great stepping point because everybody needed to get their hands on. So when we finally came out on CD, forget about it. When then now people knew, oh my God, I can get that bootleg on CD, and that was Jerky Boys 1.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, with new avenues of listening that are beyond a cassette tape, we have Sirius, now we have Spotify and YouTube even. I think that it should be, if it does blow up again, then it should be not just much easier, but a lot more accessible for everybody to enjoy, and then to also look back, because there's a bunch of Jerky Boy stuff that's just sitting on the internet that anybody can look at right now.
I know. Yep. The Jerky Boys is everywhere. It's huge. And that's the cool thing. So far, I've done a lot of different magazines and a lot of different, outlets coming through the record label. Mm-hmm. And the feedback has been tremendous. Like, just very, very, very excited and very, like, glad to see that, you know, they've actually said to me, Johnny, it's just so great to see you back in your world doing this stuff, and because so many people missed you, and I, you know, it's been a long time. It's been a long time, and you know, it's been a long time coming. So you're talking almost 25 years, you know.
Yeah, Jerky Boys is I wrote down when I was listening to the new one, and then also I went back and watched the one you guys did with MTV, and you were calling into the call center. God, that's such a good one. But it's
that was also way ahead of its time. All the shows that you saw after that came, Punked, and all these other taping shows and taxi cabs and all this other stuff that the Jerky Boys was out. And the video I did, it was for Sony and MTV, and it was a platinum selling video. And you know, back in the day, you know, the only thing that went platinum was porn. You know, think about that, because people didn't have to buy them; you just rented them. So, but I have it hanging on my wall, the plaque. So that was another thing. Like when you asked before about what different mediums, that was a great medium, like a prank show where I was doing all these local pranks in supermarkets and MTV, and I was doing all kinds of shit, and it was a major home run for them.
Yeah, the MTV thing, because that's how, speaking of how the original tapes were passed around, that's how music videos are passed around. You caught it on MTV, and then, you know, everybody, that's how it blew up. You know, they see a Dr. Dre song or Van Halen, and that's how people caught on to music, because you can only watch it once, and then so if someone had it on a tape, then it was like the holy grail.
Yes. incredible. It was an incredible time, and coming up through that era, you know, like I said, it was only word of mouth. The Jerky Boys spread across the country, you know, word of mouth, and you know, I was just told by Tower, you know, the new Tower Records, that that Jerky Boys 2 is in the top 5 best comedy albums in history.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's one of the owners, the new owners over at Tower Records.
That's an accomplishment. That's a huge, huge accomplishment.
Yeah, I mean, and I said, geez, I never heard of that. And he said, yeah, Johnny, I just looked it up. And I was like blown away. I said, that's fucking amazing.
Now, have you ever thought, since it's so timeless, that, you know, we seem to have this, especially people who I would say aren't huge comedy fans, so that it's easy for them to disassociate with this, but they are able to have this revisionist history when it comes to comedy. So now they're looking back at jokes that probably wouldn't translate well today. But I think it's an issue where you have to acknowledge that, you know, things have changed, but I still think a lot of anything from the past can be funny if you can just, you know, put yourself back in that time period.
Yeah, I agree. And people still talk on the phone. You know, people still make phone calls, and you know, you know, that's what the Jerky Boys was all about. The Jerky Boys from day one was these crazy characters getting into fucking like absolutely absurd situations and chaos, and that's what ensued. So absurdity and chaos. And that is still the deal of the day. So I pretty much, all I have to do is, you know, just sit down and you know, do what I do. And I think people still appreciate that absurdity and that chaos, you know, because that's what makes it funny, you know. And like you said earlier, my characters were never, ever, and I did this purposely, they were never out there to hurt or to be insensitive or to make somebody on the other end of the line, other end of the line feel terrible or feel bad or insult them. That's even though Frank Rizzo might say, I'll wrap your fucking head in with a ratchet. And then he comes right back. He comes right back with, I'm the best. You don't got nobody down there to work like me. So there's nothing about the Jerky Boys where people would walk away and say, man, that's really hurtful, and that's really very mean-spirited. Because that's not what that's not what I ever set out to do. That's, you know, it's just not how I work.
Yeah, and you can definitely see it even in the NTV video, especially like my favorite bit with Saul, where he left his sandwich in his shoes, or left his shoes upstairs, and he was trying to get the shoes, and then he got beat up by the security officer. Like it hurts no one in the long run, and those people, you know, working at the call center were just as weirded out as they had to be.
Right. And that's the way it's always been self-deprecating. And when you look back to my gay character was famous many, many decades ago, before it was even cool to be doing gay characters. So RuPaul is a big fan, Jerky Boys fan. Actually, when I did RuPaul's show a while back, he had all my CDs for me to sign. And one of my biggest fans ever, RuPaul and Mariah Carey. I mean, you can go down the list of these. I actually, Mariah asked me to be in her Honey video. And so my fan base would even these, and then that's the same thing they bring up. They bring it up because they say, Johnny, it's the only comedy that I can really listen to where it's so fucking hilarious. I piss myself laughing, and yet there's nothing hurtful and there's nothing that is about it that I find disdainful or distasteful. And Mariah actually named her. She had 2 Jack Russells, and she named them Bing and Bong after my gay character.
That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But like I said, she called me. I was in. She was shooting in Puerto Rico, and I was in Pittsburgh working for Anheuser-Busch, selling beer, and with my Jerky Boys product. project, and Mariah called me and asked me to be in her honey video, and it was a great fun.
Well, that's really cool, man. I'm really glad that you're coming back and you're going to introduce this whole new world. I mean, not whole new world, but this new crop of young comedy fans to something they should know. And I'm glad you're with Comedy Dynamics because they're a great company. I've done I've talked to a lot of the people that they represent, and they seem to have some good heads over there.
Yeah, they're good people, and I can't say anything but good things about them. They've been very, very patient with me. The world is a bit of a different place, it's hard. It's like you can't, when somebody does comedy, and I don't do stand-up comedy, so like I said, I'm very, very, I do these live shows now. I've been doing live shows right before this COVID hit, mm-hmm. and I try to do rooms about anywhere from 200 to 300, maybe 400 people, and this way it's intimate. You get to, you really get. I've stood up in front of 500,000 people at Woodstock, and I've stood up in front of 5,000 people at a Comic-Con. And when you're doing 5,000 people or anything more than that, you get lost. You can't. It's very hard to be intimate.
Yeah.
But when you do small rooms, it's great. And Chris Mazzilli actually moderates so that it's good cop, bad cop, almost like James Lipton. You know how he used to do the show?
Oh, yeah.
And it's more of an interview. It's more of an interview because we'll play some skits, and all the people, they know every single word to every single skit. So we'll go over that. We'll laugh our asses off. Then people have tons of questions for me. Then I do a Q&A, and they love it. And the show's about an hour and 15 minutes. And we just have an incredible fucking blast. It's so much fun. And so that's what I've been up to as far as, if you want to say stand-up or on a stage up in front of a crowd. I tell stories. And when I tell stories, people listen to them, and they're either mortified or they're fucking hysterical. Because I tell stories about my family and how I grew up, and a lot of it's off the fucking wall. I'm the oldest of 5 children. So I was always in kind of trouble, mischievous, and so when I tell stories, we all get into it, and people tell their stories, and so it's a lot of fun. So once this COVID gets out of here, I'm sure I'll get back to it.
Yeah, it'll be great. It'll be great to see you touring around with this new material. I can't wait for people to see every single one of these tracks. Listen to every single one of these tracks because this is very nice to have right now.
Thank you very much, man.